I remember it was a Saturday morning when this started. I get a phone call from my director of emergency management. I'm like, well, that's not a good sign. Our most core mission critical applications were no longer available, to include our entire back office ERP system. Our entire phone system was encrypted. Our property tax collection application, which makes up close to 80-90% of our operating budget, was impacted. First thing I said was, if you can't pay your people, then we're not going to be an organization for much longer.
How well had your leadership training help you navigate at the beginning of this panic?
I think it played a significant role. We had to make decisions really quite quickly to figure out how we were going to be operational again.
Today's guest is Kevin Kerrigan, Chief Information Officer for the Fulton County Government. He is an executive IT leader specializing in digital transformation within local government. He leads technology strategy that enhance public services, strengthen infrastructure, and improve operational efficiency across the organization.
I guess what you'd call soft skills, but I consider them in my role now hard skills that are just required to be successful. I'd say these soft skills are becoming more and more important each and every day.
What are some of the general observations you can make now being a leader in a large government environment, in particular the CIO space? Let's say looking back to predecessor CIO challenges to what you see now moving forward, or future CIO challenges.
So I think the biggest challenge is
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ChoinqueCast. Today we have a very special guest, Kevin Kerrigan. He's the Chief Information Officer at Fulton County. Good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you this morning.
We've known each other for a while. What I think would be interesting to share with the audience is that you have a research background. I haven't heard that much about it. I know it's on there. I know it's on LinkedIn, and you've mentioned it from time to time. But at your own pace, if you could walk us through your affinity with the university, the research environment, and how that bridged you to public service. And along the way, feel welcome to pause when you were in Hillsborough County and we met.
Okay. Yeah. No, happy to share that story. So, always had an affinity with technology and computers and serving others. Really, that's what got me into the technology space and in my role here at Fulton County as CIO now. But, many moons ago, when I was going through my formal education, I chose to go to the University of South Florida. I was a Florida resident at the time, to pursue a computer information systems degree, really after spending a lot of quality time with my uncle, who had his own internet service provider, and really exposed me to technology and problem solving, and I just really enjoyed that experience. And so off to college I went in 1999, and really just had a wonderful opportunity because of my experience with my uncle and internship opportunities there. I just happened to find, a bulletin board that was looking for interns to help with computer programming at what was called at the time, the Florida Center for Community Design and Research. So I really didn't know what that was necessarily when I first approached the opportunity, but after meeting their director, Sean Landry, who I developed a great relationship and ended up working there for over 12 years after starting my internship. Really, the organization existed to research both really water quality and hydrology data across the state of Florida. So really any kind of water body information, whether that was estuaries, rivers, lakes, streams, watersheds, understanding, are those water bodies healthy? What is runoff doing to those water bodies within a given region? And really collecting data and using tools such as GIS to spatially capture and represent this data for local governments as well as state agencies. And so I got exposed because they needed assistance developing this web-based platform to capture this information and share this information with local governments. And so it was a great opportunity. At the time, we were coding in ASP Classic, SQL backend, so some of the earlier days of those technologies. And really, I learned a lot about environmental data research, how we captured it, how we cleaned it, and then from many different sources. So you had volunteers taking samples, you had state agencies taking samples, local agencies taking samples, including these local governments that we worked with. And so we basically just took all that data, aggregated it, and then presented this information in a digestible format, both through tabular data and spatial data. And all of this was to really offer up a solution to local governments so they had better insights to make more informed decisions about how they're managing these resources and sharing that with then the public. And our site was really, it was publicly accessible. This wasn't just something that these local governments had access to. It was out there for anyone to see. So there was a lot of transparency around the platform. And so started there as an intern working part-time as a developer, kind of learning my ropes and understanding these systems and how I could make a difference. And it just, I continued my education, grew stronger in my computer science, computer engineering capabilities, took some environmental courses along the way that overlapped with what we were doing, and just more opportunities presented themselves within what was a small research organization. We're talking under 20 staff. We had staff that actually went into the field to do sampling. We had some technical GIS staff, and then developers, and some, of course, management that was helping with contracts and, of course, payroll, all those things. But a very small organization. And it very much felt like a family. So, opportunities opened up where I took on more of a leadership role, where I then was a lead developer, then led the development team building these solutions. Then I became more of a conduit to these local government entities where I was meeting with leadership within, whether that was the public workspace or other environmental arms of these local governments, to negotiate the scopes of work, define what the work would be, understand what maintenance and support would look like for a year, and really growing the application to meet their needs. So if they wanted some new capabilities, we would also work on that. And so, it was really just
Could you say then that, let's say, a government agency was then a client of
correct. Oh,
sorts?
yes, yes. So these local governments, specifically where I was in Tampa for USF, Hillsborough County was a major client. Sarasota County, Pinellas County, and then even like regions like Swiftmud, the Southwest Florida Water Management District was a client, and eventually we got a state agency as a client as well. So we had all these client relationships, and then some smaller, you know, counties across the state of Florida as well. But the goal was to really create a statewide, what we called, the tool was the Water Atlas. So that was the environmental side. So we had water atlases for each local government or region, depending on how we size and scoped the agreement and the engagement for that particular client. And then we did also, I'd say it didn't sprout legs like the water atlas did, but we also had a tool called the Plant Atlas. So that was all things related to plants within a given region at the county and state level. And then we also had a community atlas, which was more about demographic data within a given community as well. But really, I'd say our flagship product and solution that is still up and running today is these water atlas solutions for local governments.
So just for fun, since you volunteered that you were part of a family ISP in '99, what was the scope of what an ISP did, an internet service provider in 1999? What was that initial exposure?
Gosh, so this was my uncle. It was in the Tampa Bay region. He owned a small steel construction company, but just really enjoyed technology. And so he ran a T1 line into his building. And I basically offered up daily tech support. So you could phone in and I could help with getting you online, correcting any issues you may have, troubleshooting your current environment. I helped tinker and manage the website that was created as well. So that kind of got me exposed to HTML and JavaScript and basic programming. And then I would also do house calls. So I would, you know, take software out and get people online. And I mean, we're talking the first versions of Netscape, basic dial-up modems, of course, just getting them set up. And so, and then that often led to, hey, I'm having trouble with my printer or I'm having trouble with this application. So it just developed into troubleshooting whatever technology issue they may be having, which I enjoyed, you know, understanding what it took to do that and then being able to help others solve those problems. And I'm still the tech support guy today. I actually just helped my dad get on an application on his smart device yesterday, which he was struggling with via FaceTime. So it's like, once you're the IT guy, I think you're always the IT guy.
Yeah, yours seems to be a more extended case to the family rather than just every family seems to have a designated IT person. Okay, well, let's pick up where you left off. Let's keep going because you're not at Hillsborough County yet.
Yeah. So I spent, gosh, close to 12 years with the Florida Center for Community Design and Research. We launched a number of solutions developed a number of relationships, and I just started to develop a relationship with Hillsborough County. We were meeting with them often. We were evolving their water atlas needs, and there just happened to be some opportunities that opened up at Hillsborough County that, while I enjoyed my time at the Florida Center, there was kind of an upward ceiling, right? There wasn't really much room to grow from where I was currently. We also were both grant funded and required some clients to keep us afloat. And some of that was starting to dwindle as some of our leadership were moving on and taking on other research products. So projects. So it felt like both a mix of not a lot of upward mobility left and also, some financial viability challenges within the research realm. So, um, started to explore opportunities with Hillsborough County. They had a posting for what was labeled as a systems coordinator or manager of systems coordinators. So, kind of a vague description, but it sounded quite interesting. Was going to be working within kind of a subset of IT within Hillsborough County, helping them evolve a lot of their enterprise systems. So, uh, applied for the position, was interviewed in short order, and was honestly offered the job. I think maybe 30 minutes after I left the interview, which just was really quite awesome. The director really appreciated my experience with USF and the research center, and just the fact that I was in Hillsborough County and had the relationships with other parts of the organization, and so I joined there, and that was, I believe, in 2011, and gosh, I was there for 12 years as well. So stepped into this role. Very small team, was managing just a couple of staff, but we were focused on really improving internal operations for a lot of the back office departments within the county. So procurement, HR, finance, IT, systems management, to centralize functions, to bring about efficiencies and leverage more technology and automation to streamline how public services were being delivered. So, for instance, we implemented a very robust, effective reservation management system for parks and recreation, right? Before, it was people lining up to drop off checks to get kids into summer camps. We made all of that available online so that it was much easier. We took on a very large project to automate how we reconcile purchasing card transactions from departments into our back office ERP system and then to our credit card provider with Bank of America. So that was a big success to really streamline what was a very manual, paper driven process to an automated solution. And then we, eventually worked on implementing a new ERP tool and time and attendance tool for the entire organization. So it just kept evolving. And when I stepped into Hillsborough in this role, it was for a department that was called Fiscal and Support Services, kind of almost like a middle tier department between frontline departments and back office departments. It was kind of a new concept that Hillsborough County was adopting to centralize some of these core functions to create almost like a powerful cross-functional team of IT system staff, accounting staff, contract staff, compliance staff, to where we all as a team could quickly solve problems and implement solutions, as where that could have been more of a challenge where it's like, well, we got to get IT, procurement, HR to all work together and kind of break those silos. So it was a new concept. I'd say it did ruffle some feathers, because we were, I think, moving quite quickly. And so it was hard for some of the larger central departments like IT, HR, procurement to kind of keep up with what we were trying to accomplish. But it was always in the best interest of, I think moving the county forward and achieving outcomes. And a lot of times it was related to audit findings, compliance findings that we needed to accomplish. So it was always, in the best interest of the county to bring about these efficiencies. I'd say that experiment lasted about 3 years. So there was some challenges to keep it going. Ultimately, we did dissolve that department and ended up a number of us going to these centralized departments. I rolled into IT, some other teams rolled into finance, and others into procurement and HR. But what was great about that was we still had these relationships and connections. And so now, even though we were in more centralized department structures, I would say even further kind of back end departments, we still work together cross functionally to accomplish quite a lot. And so when I moved over into IT, I took on, really a number of different roles where I had software development teams that reported to me, some innovation teams that reported to me. And as we accomplished more, I was given the opportunity to to take on, larger roles. And so the course of my 12 years at Hillsborough, by the time I was departing, I was basically operating as their IT director, CTO, where I had really all of the core verticals of an IT or enterprise IT organization reporting to me, equating to about 180 FTEs. So that was everything from networking to data center management, to endpoints management, to wireless, just all of our software development verticals, database, GIS, et cetera. So, and we were able to do quite a bit when I was able to take on those responsibilities and lead those teams. And so it was really a great experience. I felt like it was a natural progression from what I was doing at the research center to help governments to then feel like I could truly make a difference on the inside of local government to improve public services, bring about efficiencies, do so with a lot of transparencies. A lot of transparency. I'd say working in local government is a lot like working in a fishbowl. Everything is open record, everything is available and is asked for and is scrutinized by our boards. So you definitely have to be one, you want to be, but you are going to be doing the right thing for the right reasons. And so it was really a great experience at Hillsborough County, which really then afforded me opportunities that allowed me to take on and be qualified, I think, and capable of the role I'm in now at Fulton County.
Now, somewhere in that process, in that 12-year period, you were actually seeking some leadership development opportunities and or coaching. What triggered that in this time frame you just talked about?
So I realized as I was progressing through my career that, I had developed fairly strong technical skills. And I felt like if I could solve technical problems, I could really help a lot of people. But then as I took on these larger and larger leadership roles, I realized that the people leadership side of the equation was really becoming much more important for me. So, I also, pursued and accomplished certification. So project management professional was one of those, right? Being responsible for leading large, enterprise projects, but also understanding the importance of leading people, what motivates people, how I organize my day to day, how I present myself and become a good storyteller, how I influence versus direct people to move in the direction we need to move in. Because I would say that's a big challenge in local government is you have a lot of different elected officials that you would provide shared services to, and they can go off and do their own thing if they want to. And a lot of keeping that centralized and organized and efficient is through building relationships, maintaining those relationships, and delivering on the service offerings you're providing. And so I felt like that piece of developing, I guess what you'd call to a degree soft skills, but I consider them in my role now hard skills that are just required to be successful, um, became more and more important. And honestly, through I think just some circumstance was one of my um, leaders over our project management office attended one of your open enrollment courses around leadership development because she was very driven as well, and to meet requirements for her PMP credentialing as well, had a great experience. So came back raving about your class and how you delivered it and just great she thought the experience it was and how much she learned that, I then pursued, reaching out to you to start taking your open enrollment courses as well. And really I had the same experience. Really appreciated the way you delivered your content, your history, your background, and what you've done throughout your multiple careers. It was, just was very much enlightening for me and I think helped me develop as a leader as well. And so I think through that we've developed, I'd say, a very good relationship where we've partnered now where I have worked with you to build really custom in-house programs, right? Where now I'm putting my current leaders and what I would consider my next generation of leaders through your course offerings, and we've kind of pruned and identified the modules that I think work best given where our culture is and where we're trying to go with our culture. And so I feel like that's been just really quite successful. I think, well, we've known each other now at least 6, 7 years. We've been working together now at multiple organizations.
Yeah, it might be 17, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
One of the things I will want to share with the audience that struck me was when we were doing a large program, and I believe we were using a county library, all these different places we went to. you approached me, I don't know if it was verbally or with email, but you talked about, hey, can I get some additional coaching from you? And that to me was the beginning of the relationship growing. Not many people reach out to others to say, hey, I want to get better. Not that something's wrong, which I think was a prevailing mindset that if, quote, you were sent to coaching at the county meant something was wrong. It was this curiosity. Maybe this was the right brain part of your personality, but that's the part that really stuck with me and I think set the stage. I do want to return to some of the challenges within the county, but just to round out your path, let's get you from Hillsborough County to Fulton County to tie that off.
Yeah, sure. So, like I had mentioned, I've been with Hillsborough County for well over a decade, 12 to 13 years. Was enjoying my role as the IT director. We did have a CIO that was a new role that was developed at the executive level, and I enjoyed my relationship with him, learned a lot from him, but realized if I wanted to lead the IT organization at the C level, I was going to need to pursue other organizations. He had come in, he hadn't been there long, and there was no signs he was looking to move on or change roles. And so I realized at that point, if I was going to, move up to that next level and really be able to have, I think, the impact I could and with my leadership um, abilities that I was developing and just where I wanted to be as effective as I could be for a local government organization, I needed to pursue other opportunities. So, you know, that meant also considering a larger swath outside of the state of Florida. Atlanta was another, area, of course, a very large metro area with lots of opportunities, large governments as well. Because Hillsborough County, you know, I believe around 1.4 million residents. We had 6,000 employees, over $1 billion budget. We were one of, Hillsborough County is one of the largest counties really across the United States. And so I was looking for something of similar size as well. So something that equated to, that type of opportunity. I saw a posting available for a deputy CIO role at Gwinnett County. So it's a neighboring county within the metropolitan area of Atlanta. Applied for that role and received an opportunity to interview, went through multiple rounds of interviews with that organization and was ultimately offered the opportunity to take on the deputy CIO role with Gwinnett County. So that's really the number two position. It was actually a larger IT organization, pretty centralized, providing services because Gwinnett County still had a lot of unincorporated space as well. So they were offering up and providing services for all of their courts and justice organizations, as well as fire rescue organizations, things of that nature. So again, fairly similar in size, around 6,000 employee workforce, of $1 billion plus budget, but a sizably larger IT organization, closer to 250 FTEs. Now, a number of those contracted as well, but very centralized model, which I appreciated, and an opportunity to lead, some pretty large teams. And so took that opportunity in, I think that was 2022, and made the move up to Georgia to start that position, and really did enjoy the people there, enjoyed the opportunity. I will say it was a fairly short engagement, and not because I didn't enjoy who I was working with and didn't think I could be of value there. It's just shortly after joining, within, I believe, a month or two, a headhunter firm reached out to me about the CIO position for Fulton County. And so that was something that I've been, attaining and pursuing. And I saw also after even just a few months of being at Gwinnett that what I was told as far as what my role would be and what the actuals of what my role was turning out to be was not the same. It was a little more command and control than I thought it was going to be. I did not have, I think, I guess, autonomy to be as effective as I thought I could be in that role to implement change and adopt some newer technologies and newer ways of just leading teams. And so I saw kind of the writing on the wall, like, I don't know how effective I'm going to be able to be in this role here. And so started down this path of this headhunter conversation for the CIO position at Fulton County. And it was a very thorough process, but as it should be, right? So it's an important role. For Fulton County is the largest county in the state of Georgia. Of course, Atlanta is the county seat. So I believe there was at least 5 rounds of interviews with different varying levels of leadership within the county, as well as even just some screening interviews with the headhunter firm that Fulton County had hired to go find their next CIO. And like I said, they found my LinkedIn profile and reached out to me. So it was not something I was necessarily pursuing, like I said, but it was just an opportunity I couldn't see where it would, what it would turn into. After about, I'd say 6 months of a vetting process, they
Wow.
they offered me the role. Yeah, it did take quite some time to. I mean, even just scheduling the meeting or the interviews took some time based on their leadership's availability. So yes, it took about 6 months to go from a candidate to being offered the position. So I always joke that my role and position at Gwinnett is probably one of my shortest tenured jobs on my resume, going back to even when I was a part timer pre college. But it wasn't easy to leave, but I felt like it was the right move given the opportunity. And I still have a great relationship with the CIO at Gwinnett County. She's still there. We still meet up at common networking events and share, our challenges and how we're responding to them. So that's been positive. So yeah, so started in February of 2023 with Fulton County. So I'm approaching, it's actually my 3-year anniversary is coming up here in a couple
Goodness.
weeks. So it's gone by quite quickly. I'd say the experience has been challenging and rewarding at the same time. Shortly after arriving, I'd been there less than a year. I was heavily focused on just understanding the organization, understanding what systems, applications, what our network looked like, what the current leadership team and current skill sets were at within the organization, what our biggest challenges were coming into the role. And so I really did a full assessment of the organization. And then we also did a quick, really just rationalization exercise where we documented everything in our environment and tied a business criticality to it as well. Because that was just how I wanted to get my arms around everything going on within the role in the organization. And, luckily that's something that really paid off for us because in January of 2024, we fell victim to a very significant cyber incident, a ransomware attack by bad actors that were able to infiltrate our environment, locked up the majority of our on-prem server infrastructure, and was demanding a hefty ransom to unlock it, de-encrypt it, and get us back in operation. So that was a significant impact for Fulton County. It was very much in the news. We had to enable our pretty hefty cyber insurance policies that we worked with outside legal counsel to ramp up and start our both negotiation process with these bad actors, understanding really what was infiltrated, what potentially may have been exfiltrated from our environment to use for ransom, understanding what security measures needed to be implemented to harden our environment, and then go through, of course, everything we would need to do to recover from such an incident. And so that was, I mean, I had been involved in small data breaches in prior roles, but nothing to this extent where quite literally, our most core mission critical applications were no longer available to include our entire back office ERP system, which is, how you run your operations, right? That's everything from budget, finance, payroll, accounting, supplier management. So just about everything you need to do to keep your county operational. Our entire phone system was encrypted, so our phone systems were down. Our courts and justice applications that manage all of our case management for all of our courts within the county where it was impacted. Our property tax collection application, which makes up close to 80-90% of our operating budget, was impacted. So it was quite a stressful period of time, and we had to make decisions really quite quickly to figure out how we were going to be operational again. And so, I remember it was a Saturday morning when this started. I was out for a run at the time, and I get a phone call from both my chief information security officer and our director of emergency management. I'm like, well, that's not a good sign. So, some of the initial conversations were that we knew that it impacted our 911 operations. And so that's what's kind of triggered the starting point of the event. And so we convened our cyber security response team downtown, which was made up of executive leadership, our county attorney's office, and then key members of the IT organization to start our incident response plan. So we also
Let
had
me interrupt you real quick here. Let
sure.
me interrupt you real
Yep.
quick. because indirectly, I wasn't sure if you were going to bring this story into the ChoinqueCast, but it's great because you've shared with us just the past couple of minutes the wide range of clients that you actually support as you're retelling this story. How well had your, let's say, leadership training, living your leadership philosophy or whatever, help you navigate this at the beginning of this panic?
I think it played a significant role. I think just all of the training and education, how to approach, I'd say, high stress, high conflict situations really, I think, benefited me throughout both managing my own levels of stress, but also to be able to communicate and effectively lead us out of this very challenging time. And I will say that our county manager was very complimentary because he said throughout the entire incident, which we resolved a lot of it within the first 30 days, but it did, for getting all of our house back in order took a few months. That he said he really through the entirety of the recovery, he just appreciated the calm, collected demeanor and the way in which we approached our recovery. So it was never the house is on fire. We're running around in a state of chaos. It was very just a methodical march towards recovery and doing the best we can with the situation at hand and making decisions that I felt were putting us in the best position to recover as quickly as possible, but also as safely as possible as well. And just being able to communicate that both broadly through the rest of our C-suite organization and also, of course, down through the ranks of our IT organization that were also working basically around the clock to get us back on operational again.
You've got this range of let's say internal clients, elected versus unelected, authoritative groups versus more influential. What was the range of response you were getting from those different internal clients, and how did the communication process or the relationship improve or not improve as a result of the whole incident?
Yeah, so technically there are 46 departments or organizations within the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. A number of those are elected positions. So you have an elected sheriff, you have elected chief judges over our different courts. You have elected clerks that support those courts. And then, of course, you have an elected board that makes up the Board of Commissioners. And then you have all of the departments that roll up to our county manager's office. And right. And for some, it was an election year that this was occurring, right? So I would say you've definitely got different levels of what they would consider reasonable times to recovery and sense of urgency around those, your recovery windows.
You're
And
saying that so politely.
and so you definitely are managing. I would say some are very just unrealistic expectations, and a lot of it was just educating them around the process in which we have to go through to recover, and how can we then implement the most effective workarounds and stopgap solutions so that you can stay operational while we get your core systems back up and running. And so I think it was a lot of those types of conversations, education, but it's just also just high touch points often, right? So every day we had stand-ups with all of the leadership across the county explaining what we were doing next. And then we'd start the day with that, and we would end the day with what was accomplished and what the next day was going to look like. And we did that every day, including weekends, until we were at a state where we felt like we could start to boil that down a little bit more because we had brought back up core systems. And in many cases, just because we didn't know the severity of the impact early and we wanted to be able to pay our people, pay our vendors, we made some very, I think, timely decisions and decisions that I would say have allowed us to accelerate our technology journey quickly in those first few weeks to say, well, let's just move these systems out of our data center into the cloud and bring them up in cloud environments and adopt their now SaaS offerings for these large platforms. And so I would
I'm
say
so glad you brought that up because I think you just hit on something really central. The way I'm processing what you said when you were meeting daily, even on the weekends, to me, that's the rhythm of a daily after action review. And if my memory serves me well, very shortly before the incident, it was either late the year before or very early, if not weeks before the incident. I recall working through mid and long-term goal planning with your team. I remember we had posted flip charts up on the wall, and I remember how spirited that was with your team because there were arguments about how quickly you could accelerate these plans to move different platforms forward, like you said, whether going to the cloud or this or that. And my gut feeling with what you just said is you transition from being in the reactive panic mode to almost an opportunistic, more of an abundance mindset. It's like, hey, if everything's going to hell and we got to rebuild everything, why don't we accelerate our technology progression? And so keep talking about that. And if you can comment on your best guess on how much acceleration occurred through the event, I think the audience would like to hear that.
No, of course, yes. So right, we had gone through some strategic planning sessions with you, focused on where we needed to move the needle. We had some large platforms that we needed to really evolve that had become what I would consider technical debt legacy systems in the environment that were impacted as part of this security incident. And so because of the sense of urgency to be operational as far as our courts and justice, of course, our telephony systems, and being able to pay our staff, we prioritized really what we labeled was the big five systems. And that was after conversations with our county manager's office, CFO, and county attorney's office to say, hey, Kevin, what is the most important things we need to be doing to bring these systems back online, and how would you prioritize? And first thing I said was, if you can't pay your people, then we're not going to be an organization for much longer. That'll just lead to all kinds of challenges. And so within the first, I would say 3 days, we made the decision to lift and shift our ERP system from our existing infrastructure to our vendor's cloud environment. So we didn't jump to a new version, but we said, let's take the data and config and let's build that in their data center off-prem.
That's a pretty big deal.
Oh yeah. I mean, and we did that in, I think one is we were able to bring up our existing version of our ERP platform in the vendor's cloud environment within 10 days. And we were able to run a active payroll and accurate payroll, which included even overtime that all staff across the county had worked since the incident had occurred. I actually had one of my deputies who leads our enterprise applications vertical. He flew to Arizona, where that data center is, with a disk of our data, in a briefcase, to load that data into their environment, scan it for, of course, any malicious software, but then bring up that environment, our ERP environment, in their data center. And we did that to where we could run a successful payroll the following week later from the incident occurring. And then we brought in all the other modules that were needed to run core operations, finance, procurement, et cetera. And so that was one of our key decisions to do that, was to get that, because while we could have restored on-prem, it would have also taken it would have taken a much longer period of time to do that, because we would have had to stand up almost like a new on-prem infrastructure in what we call a green space environment, with new networking protocols and everything that would be needed to ensure that it was outside the boundaries of the existing network, and where we were still doing active recovery and investigation into what occurred, right? Because this was also a criminal, investigation going on as well.
Sure.
And so making that decision early and moving that system to that vendor's cloud environment, I think, was one of our better decisions. We were already on a path to modernize our ERP platform and move with this same vendor to their latest offering, which we're actually close to wrapping up now. And so I think that helped accelerate that, but also just gave us a stable, clean environment to work from almost immediately. And so I think that was a big benefit. And I think looking back even now, we just hit the 2-year anniversary a few days ago, was the right decision. I don't think there's been no regrets around making that decision, and kind of rinse and repeat for some of our other core systems. So like our call management system and telephony system, that was fully encrypted. Unfortunately, the backup was on the same infrastructure. We couldn't restore that. It was either rebuild and brand new on-prem or go to a cloud offering. And at that point, where the industry was going with that capabilities and technology, it just made sense to move to a cloud solution for that. So we did that in fairly short order. We had core telephony systems back up in days, and then we rolled out new capabilities for all employees, I think within 30 to 45 days, for everyone to have their line back up and running. We had rolled back to, I mean, we have thousands of employees in the county that already had cell phones, so we just made changes to point to cell phone numbers for a number of our core services. Luckily, our county website and our entire Microsoft Office 365 environment was not in our data center. So website was working for communications, email was available and protected and secure. We did a full vetting of that so we could still communicate through email easily, and we could communicate through our website until we got telephony back up and running. Similarly, we were able to move quickly with our courts and justice and our tax systems. We made the same decision, take the data. We were on latest versions on-prem there, which was good. And then we went to that vendor's SaaS offering in their cloud environments. And they worked with us as we were putting agreements together. I think we were back to a minimum viable product for both of those solutions within 3 to 4 weeks of the incident. And that moved us forward substantially as well. But I would say, to go back to your original question, I would say but for most counties to move major systems like that, one, you would typically not do them, in parallel. You would typically do those in serial because of the change management and impact on the organization. I would say we accelerated our IT and technologies by, I'd say, at least 5 to 7 years.
Wow, that's amazing. I have to agree with you. And, and I'm on the outside, a lay person, well, sort of lay person. But to me, you were just knocking off a lot of those things. We'll have to go back and look at those charts sometime because you probably just check off all that's changed. So is it a fair time to transition to a different question?
Yeah, sure. Happy to adjust.
You're a leader in a large government environment now. We've talked a little bit about that, elected versus unelected. What are some of the general observations you can make now being a leader in a large government environment, in particular the CIO space? Let's say looking back to predecessor CIO challenges to what you see now moving forward or future CIO challenges.
So I think the biggest challenge with one is what's the current service operating environment versus central or decentralized or some kind of hybrid as far as how IT resources are embedded or in a central organization within local government is the first thing you've got to look at. And then you got to understand which way is that pendulum swinging and which way has it swung in recent years. And so I would say that coming into Fulton, that pendulum was swinging towards decentralization. There was shared services. There's still very much shared services, but a number of the elected officials had embedded staff, IT staff, and were growing those embedded staff to shift away from some of the centralized shared services model. I would say, right, wrong, or indifferent, the cyber incident shifted that pendulum quickly back to a centralized module or centralized operating environment, just because now we needed to make sure that there was security baked into everything we did. I'd say the biggest
I was about to ask you
challenges.
about that, but you already answered it.
Well, right. I mean, and in the name of security, we were able to make some changes where there were some things going off, I would say a bit Wild West in embedded departments that weren't following best practices, right? And were creating, I think, exposing us in areas we shouldn't be exposing ourselves. I'm sure they're doing it in the name of productivity and getting things accomplished, but it also was not in a way that was going to, I think, keep everything as secure as it needed to be. And it's always that mix of managing risk, having the right level of security, but still being able to move things forward with a sense of urgency that's needed. That's always going to be the challenge with a centralized versus decentralized or hybrid model is if I can deliver services effectively and consistently in a centralized model, then they're not going to go off on their own and build an island. It's when there's been these missteps or there's been, I guess, expectations set that weren't hit that I said, well, now I have to go do this myself because I'm not getting the support I need from a centralized IT model. And that could be a challenge because, like I said, we're serving 40 plus departments and organizations, all with varying levels of priorities and needs. And you have to weigh those somehow, right? And I think a good, strong county manager's office can help control that or manage that more effectively. And I would say our county manager's office is doing a good job of that by setting the strategic priority and saying, these are the things that we're, one, follow the money. These are what's being budgeted this year. So this is where we're going to focus our efforts. And two, what is the mission criticality or response to a regulatory requirement that we have to meet? And then it's serve those. And in some years it's departments A, B, and C are going to get a lot of care and attention, and others this year it's not necessarily going to be your year. But in many cases, there's been times where, okay, these departments did get maybe a first version of a new technology that now we're going to expand and roll out to others. It's just a timing issue. And so I'd say the politics very much do come into play, especially when you talk about election years. So this will be another large election year for Fulton County. A number of our board members are, in some cases, are willing to vacate their seat to go after the chairman's seat. So leaving their current seat early to go. So now you're going to see, regardless, you're going to see changes in the board dynamic period, because you're having people choose to vacate a seat to go after just one available spot. So that's going to be interesting. And, we're also under a federal consent decree for our jail because of challenges we've had with maintaining the jail conditions. It's a very old jail. The facility's been around a long time. There's a lot of challenges with keeping it operational. There's been a lot of challenges with vacancies within the sheriff's office to keep the jail staffed at the levels it needs to be staffed at, just because it's, those aren't jobs that people are going after these days. And we're trying to incentivize it and offer different ways to attract talent into these, what are challenging positions and roles within a jail. So
Let
that,
me ask you this. That's a pretty complex ecosystem. I'm thinking about, politics aside, just the multiplicity of functions you're talking about in the 40s. Can you comment about the talent, the people that you need to hire, the people who can become motivated and thrive in that kind of environment? What's that look like to you now?
so one is, I think you have to have a desire for public service and helping others, right? Just because of the complexities and the challenges of serving those internally and being successful. You've got to have, I'd say, the grit to get it done, because you can get lost in, I think, the bureaucracy of government if you don't keep your eye on the outcomes you're wanting to achieve and keep pressing forward on the most important objectives. And so it takes a certain kind of person to want to step into that, want to feel like you're probably up against a lot of a friction to be successful in that environment, and have probably either had the experience or have had very similar experiences in other organizations that required, you know, that level of commitment to know how to block out the noise and still make progress, and know that it's going to take some time, but you can accomplish the outcomes you're aiming to achieve if you approach it the right way. And so I think I've got a very, I think, diversified and effective leadership team that's come from many different walks of life, that have had mixes of experiences both in private and public sector at many different levels. And I think all of that body of experience has really paid off to make us an effective leadership team for the IT organization. And I think it's, a lot of it goes back to relationship management, expectation setting, coaching up their teams to focus on what the priorities are right now, not get bogged down in the noise of the day-to-day that occurs, and still setting aside to address those things, but not letting it take over the majority of the day and not and cloud the larger efforts we're trying to accomplish.
I have to agree. When I can recall my first impressions when I met your team, I probably remember two things. One, how hard it is to corral a team like that from a schedule standpoint, because everyone's responding to all these different constituencies with different urgencies. But I was stunned that you have people on your team who have largely had very successful prior careers. And somewhere in there, that service component, maybe unfulfilled part of my career, got lit up, and you've made a space that's safe for them. Maybe that's what helped you get through this strange thing you went through 2 years ago. What other parts of the county government, what other functional CIOs would benefit from the types of training we've done together or will continue to do you think?
I mean, I think it's just getting to know your team, right? I think a lot of what we've done in our training sessions has exposed so much about who my team members are, what makes them tick. It gets them out of the, I think, daily culture to where they're more comfortable to share their experiences, and in a way where there's a clear, moderator that can help, I think, keep the conversation in a safe place, in a trusted space, but also allow for vulnerability that you may not get in your typical day-to-day working environment. And I feel like, and often we do these things off site, which I think just creates, again, entirely different feel. But I think if that allows us to even have tough and challenging conversations, which you've seen we've had around people sharing, I think, things that they've probably kept pent up or didn't want to share in, some of our other settings. But I think it's also allowed for them to see me more as who I am and allowing for that to take place and being supportive of hearing all of these different messages and knowing that through a combination of our backgrounds and leadership experience that we're then going to find the right path and we're going to work together to get to the right outcomes that we're looking for. So I think it's just allowed us to grow that, I guess, that sphere of trust and safe space to where we can have more and more of these challenging conversations that we need to have that in many cases maybe, other organizations avoid or just aren't addressing them head on. That allows for them to fester and you don't then make the leaps forward in how you're going to take your teams in the right direction effectively. I think that's been probably one of the biggest things I've gotten out of the trainings and the opportunities to just approach the day in a different manner.
You mentioned something very early in our conversation that I don't want to presume everyone's had the equivalent epiphany or at the same time relative to a career development. You made the comment that, hey, I've got all these professional credentials. I got my PMP. I'm a smart guy. I did the ISP nerd thing for the family. What would be a fun question to ask, let's say a CIO in a different organization, government or civilian? What would be a good question to ask them if they haven't made that revelation, if they haven't had that epiphany that you have? What would be the fun question to ask them to get them to start thinking about that?
I mean, I would think it's got to be something that's like, what are you now bringing to the table that has allowed you to evolve and grow and have a different perspective that would then unlock potential in others that you aren't even seeing? What is something that you've done that has challenged you in that way or and made you think differently about how you approach leading your team? I think something along those lines.
I think it's a fun question because for whatever reason, in the years when I've been involved in leadership development, which was a surprise to me, for whatever reason, a lot of people from IT departments, not necessarily at the top at the CIO level, but a lot of people from IT come to leadership courses. And it seems to be an indirect indicator to me that there's budget to do it, but not necessarily the priority to focus on people. It's as though people are onesies and twosies or threes and fours showing up. And maybe the message needs to reach more senior people like yourself.
Right. And I think unfortunately it's become in some cases, a check the box endeavor, right? Like I have my PMP, I need to go get X amount of hours in leadership development, right? So here is a good way for me to check the box and get that accomplished and maybe underestimate the powers of what those experiences would bring to the table and bring to a larger organization from a leadership perspective. And I think I realized that as well early on and when it was like, well, now I'm just going through the motions and it's not really leading to the outcomes I want. And then oftentimes you've got HR who's offering up training and has some canned leadership offerings. And they're saying, well, you don't need to go out and procure other leadership offerings, just use ours. And half the time, unfortunately, maybe that HR offering isn't really as effective as it could be or as robust as it could be to really, move the needle in what you're trying to accomplish from leadership development. It almost feels like it's just another avenue to meet a credentialing requirement versus how can it really grow your leadership team, your next level of leaders, and really start to impact and positively impact your culture.
I tend to agree, and I don't need to add to that. Is there anything else that you want the audience to know before we wind down here?
I would just say, for me, it's been in IT, you've always got your teams that want to focus on the hard skills. What's the next cert I can get in this given space, whether it be networking, cloud computing, development, now AI is, of course, all the rage. But don't lose sight on, I would say that we're going to see so much impact from AI and automation that the soft skills and the leadership skills are becoming more and more important every day. I've talked with my leadership team about how, okay, we want to promote from within is what our goal is, but what are they doing to improve their relationship management skills, their leadership skills, their communication skills, their strategic development so that they're an effective leader. So I would just say don't lose sight of how important the soft skills are to the hard skills that I know a lot of budgets go to in IT is to make sure we've got the latest and greatest technical certs, but that I'd say these soft skills are becoming more and more important each and every day.
Well, I think that's a great way to close. I certainly agree with you, and I couldn't have said it better. Thank you for joining us today, Kevin.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate the time.